Yellowstone isn't just a park, it's a ticking time bomb beneath your feet. Right now, as you're watching this video, there's something massive stirring for miles beneath Yellowstone National Park. Something so powerful that when it last erupted 640,000 years ago, it covered half of North America in ash. Today, we are going underground literally and figuratively to explore the hidden world beneath America's most famous national park. Something that NASA monitors from space because the consequences of missing the warning signs would be catastrophic. Every year, 4 million people visit Yellowstone completely unaware they're walking on one of the most dangerous geological features on Earth. Yellowstone isn't just a park, it's a ticking time bomb beneath your feet. We'll journey into underground lava lakes that could melt entire cities, meet wildlife that has adapted to live on the edge of annihilation, and examine what would happen if this geological monster decided to wake up. Right now, as you're watching this video, there's something massive stirring for miles beneath Yellowstone National Park. It's what scientists call a supervolcano, and the difference between a regular volcano and a supervolcano is like comparing a firecracker to a nuclear bomb. To put that in perspective, Mount St. Helens, which devastated the surrounding area in 1980, ejected just 1 cubic kilometer of material. This caldera measures 34 by 45 miles across. The entire Yellowstone caldera actually rises and falls like it's breathing. Between 2004 and 2010, the ground rose by nearly 7 inches. Then it started sinking again. This breathing pattern is caused by the magma chamber below expanding and contracting. Cities like Denver, Salt Lake City, and Billings would be uninhabitable. This would trigger what scientists call a volcanic winter, devastating global agriculture and potentially causing mass starvation. The ash would collapse roofs, contaminate water supplies, and make breathing nearly impossible for anyone caught outside. Think about that for a moment. The entire destructive zone is bigger than some US states. Yellowstone's last major eruption was 2,000 times more powerful. Mathematically, we're overdue. But before you start panicking, scientists are quick to point out that volcanic eruptions don't follow a precise schedule. Yellowstone could erupt tomorrow, or it might not erupt for another million years. Something so powerful that when it last erupted 640,000 years ago, it covered half of North America in ash. If you could somehow drain all the water from Lake Superior, you still couldn't fit Yellowstone's magma chamber inside it. And this entire mass of molten rocks, it's just for 6 miles beneath the surface. In geological terms, that's basically right under your feet. Today, we are going underground literally and figuratively too. Explore the hidden world beneath America's most famous national park. Something that NASA monitors from space because the consequences of missing the warning signs would be catastrophic, or why the ground in some areas is literally too hot to walk on. The answer lies in something called a supervolcano, and Yellowstone sits directly on top of one of the most powerful ones ever discovered. We're talking about what volcanologists call a pyroclastic flow. This is a ground-hugging avalanche of hot ash, pumice, rock fragments, and volcanic gas that can reach temperatures of over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit and travel at speeds of up to 450 miles per hour. Every year, 4 million people visit Yellowstone, completely unaware they're walking on one of the most dangerous geological features on Earth. What you're about to discover will change how you see this seemingly peaceful wilderness forever. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why Yellowstone's geysers exist nowhere else on Earth in such concentration? Chapter 1. The supervolcano. Most people think of volcanoes as cone-shaped mountains that spew lava. But Yellowstone is something entirely different. A supervolcano is defined as a volcano capable of producing an eruption with an ejecta volume greater than 1,000 cubic kilometers. Here's what makes Yellowstone so terrifying. Instead of having a traditional volcanic cone, Yellowstone is essentially a massive collapsed crater called a caldera. But here's where it gets really interesting. NASA doesn't just monitor Yellowstone from the ground. They use satellites to track something called ground deformation. The magma chamber beneath Yellowstone is estimated to be about 55 miles long, 20 miles wide, and 5 miles thick. What would happen if Yellowstone erupted? The first thing you need to understand is that we're not talking about a traditional volcanic eruption. Within the first day, everything within a 500-mile radius would be completely buried under feet of volcanic ash. But that's just the beginning. Yellowstone's ash would circle the globe within weeks, blocking sunlight and dropping global temperatures by 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The scary part? Yellowstone erupts roughly every 600,000 to 700,000 years. The last eruption was 640,000 years ago. What we do know is that there are warning signs: increased earthquake activity, changes in gas emissions, and significant ground deformation would all precede a major eruption. Using advanced seismic imaging, scientists have mapped an underground world that's more complex and dangerous than any science fiction movie. Recent studies using seismic tomography have revealed that Yellowstone's underground system extends much deeper than anyone previously thought. There's a second, much larger magma reservoir that sits 12 to 28 miles beneath the surface. Underground explosions create new craters, and existing geysers change their eruption patterns without warning. In 1959, an earthquake created an entirely new geyser that shot water 300 feet into the air. When this pressurized water finds a pathway to the surface, it explodes upward with incredible force, creating the geysers that make Yellowstone famous. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed massive caverns filled with superheated gas and steam. These tubes were formed during previous eruptions and now serve as conduits for heat and gas from the magma chambers below. Scientists have discovered microorganisms living in conditions that should be impossible for life. Some scientists believe that studying these organisms might give us clues about what life might look like on other planets. These thermophiles, as they're called, thrive in water temperatures that would instantly kill most life forms. Yellowstone's wolf population was completely eliminated by the 1920s, but when wolves were reintroduced in 1995, something extraordinary happened. The entire ecosystem changed in what scientists call a trophic cascade. Some of these organisms are so unique that they are being studied for potential applications in medicine and industry. Deer and elk stopped grazing in certain areas, particularly near rivers and in valleys where they could be easily ambushed. These are some of the last truly wild bison in North America, descendants of the small herd that survived the mass slaughter of the late 1800s. They carry genetic traits that have been lost in other bison populations, making them incredibly valuable for conservation efforts. Mother bears teach their cubs to stay away from hot springs and geysers, passing down knowledge that could mean the difference between life and death. These elk have learned to use the park's thermal areas as refuge zones during harsh weather. Like the bison, they know exactly where to go to find snow-free grazing areas in winter. Unlike most places in the world where human development has fragmented habitats, Yellowstone maintains intact predator-prey relationships that have existed for thousands of years. This makes it one of the most important wildlife research sites in the world. All of these remarkable adaptations, these complex relationships between predators and prey, these genetic lines that have survived for thousands of years, all of it could be wiped out in a single day. This allowed vegetation to recover in those areas, which stabilized riverbanks and created habitat for beavers. The data collected here influences conservation strategies worldwide. In many ways, Yellowstone serves as a baseline for what North American ecosystems looked like before European settlement. The park is home to over 285 bird species, including trumpeter swans, peregrine falcons, and bald eagles. Many of these birds time their migrations to take advantage of the park's geothermal features. Trumpeter swans, for example, often overwinter in areas where hot springs keep water from freezing, giving them access to food when other water sources are frozen solid. The beavers built dams, which created wetlands that attracted birds, fish, and other wildlife. Some of these tubes are large enough to drive a truck through, and they extend for miles underground. During harsh winters, wolf packs have been observed resting near hot springs and geysers where the ground is warm and snow melts quickly. These massive animals, which can weigh up to 2,000 pounds, have developed behaviors specifically adapted to the park's geothermal activity. During winter, bison will travel miles to reach areas where geothermal heat keeps the ground snow-free, making it easier to find grass. These bears have learned to time their movements to take advantage of seasonal food sources that exist because of the park's unique geology. In spring, they dig for roots in areas where geothermal activity keeps the soil soft. In summer, they fish in streams that are fed by hot springs, where the water temperature creates ideal conditions for certain types of aquatic insects that fish love. They seem to have an instinctive understanding of where the hot spots are located. They've essentially learned to use Yellowstone's supervolcano as a heating system. Some of these caverns are larger than football stadiums, and they're constantly expanding and contracting as the pressure changes. If one of these caverns were to suddenly collapse, it could trigger a chain reaction that might affect the entire hydrothermal system. Scientists named it seismic geyser, and it continued erupting for several years before gradually dying down. This deeper chamber is estimated to be 4.5 times larger than the upper chamber and contains enough molten rock to fill the Grand Canyon 11 times over. These thermal rivers connect distant geysers and hot springs in ways that scientists are just beginning to understand. When one geyser erupts, it can affect the behavior of another geyser miles away. The wildlife here doesn't just coexist with the supervolcano. In many ways, they depend on it. The United States Geological Survey maintains a network of seismometers throughout Yellowstone, monitoring every tiny tremor. This is a complex network of underground hot springs, steam vents, and superheated water that creates the geysers and hot springs we see on the surface. The water in this system can reach temperatures of over 400 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to instantly kill anyone who falls in. They detect between 1,000 to 3,000 earthquakes per year in the Yellowstone region. Most are so small you can't feel them, but they're all recorded and analyzed. Beneath Yellowstone's scenic beauty lies an alien landscape that most visitors never see or even imagine. The primary magma chamber we talked about earlier is just the beginning, but it's not just magma down there. Yellowstone sits on what geologists call a hydrothermal system. The hydrothermal system is constantly changing. New hot springs appear while others disappear. One of the most fascinating discoveries in recent years is the existence of underground rivers of superheated water that flow through the bedrock beneath Yellowstone. The underground pressure in this system is enormous. The water is so superheated that it exists in a state between liquid and gas. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery is how unstable this underground world really is. Geologists have also discovered underground lava tubes, similar to those found in Hawaii, but much larger and more extensive. The strangest part of Yellowstone's underground world might be its biology. These underground ecosystems exist in complete darkness, fed entirely by chemical energy rather than sunlight. It's like discovering alien life right here on Earth. Yellowstone's wildlife isn't just remarkable because of its diversity, it is remarkable because these animals have learned to thrive in one of the most geologically active and dangerous environments on Earth. Let's start with the most famous residents, the wolves. The wolves didn't just control the deer and elk populations. They changed their behavior. But here is what makes Yellowstone's wolves unique. They've learned to use the park's geothermal features to their advantage. The bison in Yellowstone are equally remarkable. Yellowstone's bison population is also genetically unique. The grizzly bears in Yellowstone have developed some of the most sophisticated foraging strategies found anywhere in North America. But perhaps the most impressive adaptation is how these bears have learned to avoid the park's dangerous thermal features while still taking advantage of the benefits. Yellowstone is also home to one of the largest elk herds in North America. The bird life in Yellowstone is equally impressive. What makes Yellowstone's ecosystem truly unique is how well preserved it is. Scientists use Yellowstone as a living laboratory to understand how ecosystems function when they are not disrupted by human activity. But this pristine ecosystem exists on borrowed time. If Yellowstone's supervolcano were to erupt, it would instantly destroy one of the most important wildlife preserves on Earth. Yellowstone's thermal features aren't just beautiful, they're death traps disguised as natural wonders. Every year, despite warning signs and barriers, people are seriously injured or killed by the park's geysers, hot springs, and acid pools. The stories of what happens to people who fall into these features are so disturbing that park officials often refuse to discuss the details publicly. But you deserve to know just how deadly this landscape really is. Let's start with the chemistry of death. Many of Yellowstone's hot springs aren't just hot, they're extremely acidic. He survived, but suffered burns over 100% of his body. Think about that for a moment. Every inch of his skin was burned away. He spent months in the hospital undergoing skin grafts and reconstructive surgery. His medical bills exceeded $1 million, and he was never the same person again, either physically or mentally. Steamboat Geyser, the world's tallest active geyser, can shoot water over 400 feet high with absolutely no warning. In one case, a tourist was posing for photos just 20 feet from a geyser when it erupted unexpectedly. What looks like solid ground might actually be a thin crust covering boiling water or scalding mud. They never found the person who made those footprints. The implication is terrifying. Someone walked right into a thermal feature and was dissolved so completely that no trace remained. These crusts can support someone's weight initially, giving a false sense of security, then break under movement. These bubbling pools of heated mud can reach temperatures of over 200 degrees and have the consistency of thick paint. Hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide can accumulate in low-lying areas around hot springs and geysers. A person walking through what appears to be normal air can suddenly find themselves in a pocket of CO2 so concentrated that they lose consciousness within seconds. If this happens near a thermal feature, the outcome is predictable and horrible. People seem to lose all sense of danger when confronted with something so beautiful and seemingly peaceful. And the severity of thermal injuries means that even immediate medical attention often isn't enough to save victims. Unlike other types of accidents, thermal feature incidents often result in injuries so severe that traditional first aid is useless. Witnesses describe feeling helpless as they watch someone suffer from injuries that are beyond any civilian's ability to treat. The sound of someone screaming as they are literally dissolved alive is something that haunts rescue workers for years. The park has helicopters on standby and maintains agreements with burn centers across the region. The harsh reality is that if someone falls into one of Yellowstone's most dangerous thermal features, they're probably going to die, and the focus shifts to preventing additional casualties among would-be rescuers. But when someone falls into a 200-degree acid pool, there's often nothing that modern medicine can do. The contrast between the serene appearance of a hot spring and its deadly nature creates a cognitive dissonance that leads people to take risks they would never take in other situations. These gases are invisible and often odorless in lethal concentrations. Yellowstone has extensive safety measures including boardwalks, barriers, and warning signs. But every year, visitors ignore these safety measures to get closer to thermal features, often for photographs or because they don't understand the real danger. Park statistics show that thermal feature accidents spike during high tourist seasons. When crowds of people try to get the perfect Instagram shot, they can cause respiratory failure, loss of consciousness, or even death from asphyxiation. There are documented cases of people collapsing near thermal features from gas inhalation, then falling unconscious into the boiling water. Witnesses said his screams lasted for several minutes before he was pulled under by the bubbling mud. When they finally managed to retrieve his body hours later using ropes and hooks, it was so badly damaged that he was barely recognizable as human. If someone falls into a mud pot, they don't just burn, they get trapped. The thick, viscous mud acts like quicksand, making it impossible to escape while being slowly cooked alive. The bubbling action of the mud pot means that victims are essentially stirred into the superheated mixture. Imagine walking on what you think is solid ground, taking a step, and suddenly breaking through into water hot enough to boil legs. The superheated water and steam killed him instantly, but not before witnesses heard his screams echo across the basin. It can remain dormant for years, lulling visitors into thinking it's safe, then suddenly erupt with the force of a rocket launch. In 2018, Steamboat began erupting more frequently than it had in decades, with some eruptions lasting over 40 minutes and shooting water higher than a 30-story building. A 23-year-old man named Colin Scott fell into Norris Geyser Basin East Porkchop Geyser while trying to find a place to soak illegally. Many of Yellowstone's hot springs contain dissolved minerals and chemicals that are toxic to human tissue. Grand Prismatic Spring, one of Yellowstone's most photographed features, looks like a rainbow-colored paradise. Tourists line up by the thousands to take selfies near its edge. What they don't realize is that this beautiful pool is 160 degrees Fahrenheit and contains chemicals that would kill them in minutes if they fell in. The rainbow colors that make it so Instagram-worthy are actually caused by heat-loving bacteria that thrive in conditions that would instantly destroy human life. Sulfuric acid, hydrogen sulfide, and arsenic are commonly found in concentrations that would be lethal even if the water were at room temperature. Old Faithful, Yellowstone's most famous geyser, shoots water up to 180 feet in the air at temperatures around 204 degrees Fahrenheit. The water column weighs several tons and erupts with enough force to crush a car. If you were standing in the wrong place when Old Faithful erupted, you wouldn't just be burned, you'd be pulverized by the sheer force of the water. Some springs contain mercury, lead, and other heavy metals that cause organ failure. The water in these springs isn't just hot enough to cook flesh, it is chemically aggressive enough to break down bone. The spring was over 200 degrees Fahrenheit with a pH of 1.5. His sister watched in horror as he fell in. Park rangers arrived within minutes, but it was already too late. The extreme conditions meant that his body had dissolved so completely that when they returned the next day to attempt recovery, they found nothing. Nothing. The acidic water had consumed every trace of him overnight. Some pools have pH levels as low as 1.2, making them more acidic than battery acid. To put this in perspective, that's acidic enough to dissolve metal. Now imagine what it does to human flesh. The combination of extreme heat and acid creates an environment that can literally dissolve human tissue in minutes. The most horrific case happened in 2016, and it perfectly illustrates why Yellowstone's thermal features are so terrifying. But Colin Scott wasn't the first, and he won't be the last. Since Yellowstone became a national park in 1872, at least 22 people have died from thermal feature accidents, and those are just the documented cases, and survived, but with injuries so severe they're barely recognizable as human. The mechanism of injury from thermal features is particularly brutal. Water above 140 degrees Fahrenheit causes third-degree burns almost instantly. Many of Yellowstone's features exceed 200 degrees, hot enough to cause what medical professionals call flash burns that damage tissue faster than the nervous system can register. Pain. The real number might be higher, because in the early days of the park, record-keeping was spotty, and some disappearances might have been thermal feature deaths that were never properly investigated. Here is what the Park Service doesn't want you to know. Many more people have fallen into thermal features. The survivors' stories are haunting. In 1981, a man fell into a hot spring at Fountain Paint Pot. But it's not just the temperature that makes these features deadly. The most insidious part is how deceptive these features can be. The geysers present their own unique and terrifying dangers. But Old Faithful is predictable and heavily monitored. It's the unpredictable geysers that are truly terrifying. Here is something that will give you nightmares. Park rangers have stories of tourists who climbed over barriers to get closer to dormant geysers, not realizing that these features can activate without any warning signs. Ground conditions around thermal features are like walking through a minefield where the mines are invisible. A park ranger once told me about finding footprints in the thermal crust around a hot spring, leading right to the edge and then disappearing. The park's mud pots present perhaps the most horrifying type of danger. In 1890, a park employee named Frederick Trishman fell into a mud pot while working near Fountain Paint Pot. The gases emitted by thermal features add another layer of danger that most people never consider. Carbon dioxide is particularly insidious because it is heavier than air and can accumulate in depressions around thermal features. What makes these accidents even more tragic is that they're completely preventable. The psychology of risk-taking around thermal features is fascinating and disturbing. Park rangers undergo specialized training to respond to thermal feature accidents, but the remote location of many features, the psychological impact on families and witnesses of thermal feature accidents is severe and long-lasting. Emergency responders have developed specialized protocols for thermal feature rescues, but these protocols often focus more on body recovery than rescue. Beyond the well-known geysers and hot springs, Yellowstone exhibits some of the strangest and most unsettling natural phenomena found anywhere on Earth. These bizarre occurrences should make you question everything you think you know about the stability of our planet. What I am about to tell you will make you realize that the ground beneath our feet is far more alien and unpredictable than we ever imagined. Yellowstone experiences earthquake swarms, where hundreds of small earthquakes occur in rapid succession over days or weeks. The earthquakes don't happen randomly, they form lines, grids. The entire caldera rises and falls in a cycle that scientists euphemistically call breathing. But this isn't gentle, natural breathing, this is violent, erratic gasping. Then, without warning, the movement resumes with even greater intensity. Scientists have no idea what causes these periods of dormancy or what might trigger them. To end, between 2004 and 2010, the ground rose nearly 7 inches. The park is filled with mysterious noises that come from deep underground, hissing, rumbling, groaning. In 2018, seismologists recorded a sound that lasted for over 20 minutes, a low-frequency rumble that seemed to come from the entire caldera simultaneously. They still don't know what caused it, but it was powerful enough to be detected by seismic equipment hundreds of miles away, and what some describe as metallic scraping. Sounds like massive pieces of machinery operating far below the surface. These sounds are caused by steam and gas moving through underground chambers and fissures, but to visitors who don't understand the source, they can be deeply unsettling. The earthquake dramatically altered Yellowstone's entire hydrothermal system overnight. The lake will rise several inches for no apparent reason, then drop just as mysteriously. These fluctuations aren't related to rainfall, snowmelt, or any other surface water input. They seem to be connected to underground pressure changes in the hydrothermal system that we don't fully understand. Some geysers increased their activity tenfold, others decreased or stopped entirely, and several new hot springs appeared in areas where none had existed before. But here is the truly bizarre part. Some of these changes occurred in areas that were hundreds of miles from the earthquake's epicenter, with no apparent connection to the seismic activity. Animals appear to sense changes in geological activity days or even weeks before humans do. There are documented cases of entire herds of elk or bison avoiding areas days before new thermal features appeared in those exact locations. The high mineral content in the water combined with the constant geological activity creates conditions that interfere with electronic equipment in unpredictable ways. GPS devices become wildly inaccurate in some areas of the park, sometimes showing locations that are miles off from reality. Cell phones and radios experience interference that creates sounds like voices speaking in unknown languages. Some of these patterns are so regular and precise that they look artificial, as if there's some kind of massive machine operating far below the surface. It is as if the animals can sense underground changes that our most sophisticated monitoring equipment can't detect. Monitoring data from the past 2 decades shows that the strange occurrences in Yellowstone aren't just continuing, they are accelerating. Whatever forces are at work beneath the park seem to be building towards something, and we have no idea what that something might be. Park rangers report finding new hot springs in the morning, where none existed the night before. Bison have been observed gathering in unusual numbers near certain geysers hours before major eruptions, as if they're anticipating the activity. Birds sometimes flee areas en masse for no apparent reason, only for new thermal features to appear in those areas days later. Areas that were safe to walk on for decades suddenly become dangerous as new thermal activity develops beneath the surface. Areas of ground that appear completely normal can be 30 or 40 degrees warmer than surrounding areas. These hot spots can appear and disappear seemingly at random, suggesting that there are thermal processes occurring just below the surface that we don't understand and can't predict. The thermal crust around hot springs expands and contracts in patterns that create new dangers daily. Digital cameras sometimes record sounds that weren't audible when the video was taken, picking up low-frequency rumbles and vibrations that human ears can't detect. What was solid ground yesterday might be a death trap today. Familiar. Trails become unsafe overnight due to new thermal activity that appears without warning. Geysers change their eruption patterns not gradually over years, but suddenly, sometimes from one eruption to the next. To put that in perspective, that's like the entire state of Rhode Island suddenly becoming 7 inches taller. Then, just as mysteriously, it began sinking again, as if there is some massive underground process operating on a schedule that we can't detect or predict. Lake-level measurements going back over a century show these patterns, repeating but with variations that suggest whatever is causing them is becoming more active over time. Park rangers working night shifts report hearing sounds like massive doors slamming shut deep underground, or what sounds like enormous chains being dragged across stone. Geysers that have been dormant for decades suddenly start erupting with no warning. Park rangers arrive at work to find new hot springs or steam vents in areas that were completely normal the day before. These new features often appear in locations where geological surveys have shown no indication of thermal activity. It's as if the underground systems are constantly evolving, constantly changing in ways that we can't predict or understand. Hot springs change temperature dramatically overnight, sometimes cooling by 50 degrees or more, then returning to their original temperature just as mysteriously. These sounds are probably caused by thermal expansion and contraction of underground rock formations, but knowing the scientific explanation doesn't make them any less unsettling when you are alone in the wilderness at AM. And shapes that suggest there are massive, organized structures deep underground that we can't see and don't understand. While one section might be rising at an alarming rate, another section might be collapsing. It's as if the ground is a giant, unstable balloon that's being inflated and deflated from multiple points by some unseen force deep underground. GPS stations throughout the park record these movements in real time, and watching the data is like watching a patient's vital signs during a medical emergency, erratic, unpredictable, and deeply concerning. It's as if the Earth itself is trying to tell us something, but we don't speak its language. In 2017, one swarm included over 2,300 earthquakes in just 2 months. These aren't the typical sulfur smells you might expect near hot springs. These are odors so unusual that people struggle to describe them. Park rangers report walking through areas that smell completely normal, then suddenly encountering pockets of air that smell like they came from another planet. The gases are following underground pathways that we can't see, emerging through cracks so small they're invisible to the naked eye. Some describe smells like burning metal, others like rotting vegetation mixed with chemicals. These are volcanic gases seeping up through microscopic cracks in the earth, carrying with them the scent of processes occurring miles below the surface. Think about that, more than 1,000 individual earthquakes in a single month. All in the same area. That's not normal. That's not how the Earth is supposed to behave. Scientists still don't fully understand what triggers these swarms, but they are closely monitoring them. Because they could be the canary in the coal mine, the warning sign that something much bigger is building underground. Let's start with the earthquakes, because what's happening beneath Yellowstone defies every rule about how earthquakes are supposed to work. Yellowstone experiences between 1,000 and 3,000 earthquakes every year. That's up to 8 earthquakes every single day. Most are so small that only seismographs can detect them, but here is what should terrify you. The constant seismic activity means the ground is literally never still. If you had sensitive enough equipment, you could detect the Earth moving beneath your feet at every moment in Yellowstone. The planet is alive and it's restless. But it is not just the frequency that is abnormal, it is the patterns that make scientists lose sleep at night. Here is what really should keep you awake at night. Some of these earthquake swarms occur in perfect geometric patterns. The ground deformation in Yellowstone is unlike anything found elsewhere on Earth, and it reveals just how unnatural this place really is. But here's where it gets really disturbing. Different parts of the caldera move independently, sometimes in opposite directions simultaneously, the most unsettling part. Sometimes the ground movement stops completely for months at a time, as if whatever force is causing it has suddenly gone dormant. Visitors to Yellowstone often report strange smells that seem to materialize out of thin air. But here is what is truly eerie. These smells can appear suddenly in areas where there are no visible thermal features, then disappear just as quickly. Even more disturbing are the sounds that Yellowstone makes, sounds that shouldn't exist in nature. Some of these sounds are so loud they can be heard from miles away, yet they seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The most disturbing sounds occur at night, when the park is quiet and the normal daytime noises of tourists and traffic fade away. Yellowstone experiences what geologists call thermal disturbances, sudden, inexplicable changes in the behavior of geysers and hot springs that defy scientific understanding. New thermal features appear regularly in Yellowstone, sometimes overnight. One of the most documented thermal disturbances occurred after the 1959 Hebgen Lake earthquake. The water levels in Yellowstone Lake fluctuate in ways that make no sense according to our understanding of hydrology. But here is what is really disturbing. The water level changes sometimes occur in patterns that suggest a rhythm or cycle. Perhaps the most unsettling phenomenon in Yellowstone is how the landscape literally changes from day to day in ways that shouldn't be possible. The ground itself seems to have a mind of its own. Wildlife behavior in Yellowstone can be so strange and unpredictable that it seems almost supernatural. Even more disturbing are the reports of animals behaving in ways that suggest they are responding to stimuli that humans can't perceive, the electromagnetic properties of Yellowstone. Create an environment that seems to exist outside the normal laws of physics. Some visitors report that their cameras malfunction near certain thermal features, producing images with strange distortions, unexplained lights, or shadows that don't correspond to anything visible to the human eye. Temperature anomalies occur throughout Yellowstone that can't be explained by visible thermal features. Infrared imaging reveals that these temperature anomalies form patterns that look almost intentional, geometric shapes, lines, and grids that suggest there's some kind of organized structure deep underground. The most disturbing aspect of all these phenomena is how they are becoming more frequent and more intense over time. The question isn't whether Yellowstone will erupt again, it's when. And while scientists can't predict exactly when that might happen, they can paint a detailed picture of what would occur if Yellowstone's supervolcano awakened. The scenario is more catastrophic than most people can imagine. The eruption wouldn't start with a single massive explosion. Instead, it would likely begin with increased earthquake activity, ground deformation, and changes in the park's hydrothermal features. The ash cloud from the eruption would begin spreading across the continent within hours. Computer models show that cities as far away as Chicago would be covered in several inches of ash within 3 days. The ash would be abrasive enough to damage car engines, collapse roofs, and contaminate water supplies. Countries that are currently major food exporters would struggle to feed their own populations. Mass starvation would become a real possibility in many parts of the world. The initial blast would be equivalent to thousands of nuclear weapons detonating simultaneously. FEMA estimates that up to 90,000 people could be killed immediately by the eruption, with millions more affected by the ash fall and climate impacts. Insurance companies would be bankrupted by the scale of the claims. Entire industries would be wiped out overnight. The immediate destruction would be over in days or weeks, but the climate effects could persist for years or even decades. Humans survived the eruption of Toba, a supervolcano in Indonesia, about 74,000 years ago. We have global communication systems, international trade networks, and agricultural techniques that could help us adapt to changed conditions. We also have months or years of warning before an eruption, which would allow for evacuation and preparation. That eruption was even larger than Yellowstone's biggest known eruption, yet our species not only survived but eventually thrived. Scientists would know well in advance if an eruption were imminent, providing time to evacuate people from the danger zone and begin preparations for the global impacts. From the massive magma chambers lurking just beneath our feet to the incredible wildlife that calls this dangerous landscape home, Yellowstone is far more than just a beautiful national park. It's a window into the raw, untamed forces that shape our planet. Would you walk those boardwalks knowing you're standing above a geological powder keg? Are you curious about the deepest parts of the ocean? The most extreme places humans have ever survived? The hidden secrets of other natural wonders? Check out our playlist on natural disasters, and don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest deep dives into the incredible and terrifying world we live in. Your suggestions help shape what we cover next, so don't hold back. Drop a like if you'd brave the danger to see this natural wonder in person, and let me know in the comments if you think the risk is worth it. It would test our ability to cooperate globally, to adapt to rapidly changing conditions, and to maintain civilization in the face of unprecedented disaster. Sometimes the most beautiful places are also the most deadly, and that's what makes Earth the most incredible place in the known universe. It could take generations for agriculture to recover in affected areas. The explosion would be so powerful that it would be heard across most of North America. The initial pyroclastic flows would travel outward from the caldera at speeds of up to 450 miles per hour, incinerating everything in their path. Remember the supervolcano that could change the course of human history, the underground rivers of acid hot enough to dissolve flesh, and the incredible resilience of life that thrives in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Scientists estimate that these warning signs would become apparent months or possibly years before the main eruption. Roads, airports, hospitals, and communication systems across a huge area would be compromised. The logistics of providing aid to millions of displaced people would be overwhelming. This zone of total destruction would include parts of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. The global cooperation that would be necessary for recovery might be difficult to achieve when every country is dealing with its own crisis. Cities like West Yellowstone, Montana, and Island Park, Idaho would simply cease to exist. But when the eruption does begin, everything would change in a matter of minutes. Within the first hour, everything within a 40-mile radius of the caldera would be completely destroyed. Air travel would be grounded across much of the continent. Due to the danger ash poses to jet engines, the agricultural heartland of America would be buried under ash, destroying crops and contaminating farmland. But that's just the beginning. The economic impact would be immediate and devastating. Interstate highways across the western United States would become impassable. But the real catastrophe would be global. The ash and gas ejected into the atmosphere would begin affecting worldwide climate within weeks. Sulfur dioxide from the eruption would combine with water vapor to create sulfuric acid aerosols that would reflect sunlight away from Earth. Global temperatures would drop by 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. This volcanic winter would devastate agriculture worldwide. Growing seasons would be shortened or eliminated entirely in many regions. The United States government has contingency plans for a Yellowstone eruption, but the scale of the disaster would overwhelm any response capability. The economic cost would be beyond calculation. Some economists estimate that a Yellowstone eruption could cause a global economic collapse worse than the Great Depression. But perhaps the most sobering aspect of a Yellowstone eruption is how long the effects would last. Recovery would be complicated by the fact that much of the infrastructure needed for disaster response would be destroyed or damaged. International relations would be severely strained as countries struggle to deal with climate impacts. And potential refugee crises, food shortages could lead to conflicts between nations. However, it's important to put this in perspective. While a Yellowstone eruption would be catastrophic, it wouldn't end human civilization. Modern technology would give us significant advantages that our ancestors didn't have. The monitoring systems currently in place around Yellowstone are more sophisticated than anything that has ever been deployed around a volcano. But even with all our technology and preparation, a Yellowstone eruption would represent one of the greatest challenges humanity has ever faced. The good news is that the probability of a Yellowstone eruption in any given year is extremely low, about 1 in 730,000. You're more likely to be hit by lightning multiple times than to experience a Yellowstone eruption in your lifetime, but the consequences would be so severe that scientists continue to monitor the supervolcano closely, hoping to provide as much advance warning as possible if the sleeping giant ever begins to wake up. So there you have it, the complete story of America's sleeping giant. The next time you see a peaceful photo of Old Faithful or a serene shot of Yellowstone Lake, remember what lies beneath. But here's my question for you. Knowing everything you now know about Yellowstone's hidden dangers, would you still visit? And while you're in the comments, tell me what incredible place we should explore next. If this journey into Yellowstone's hidden world fascinated you, you'll love our other videos exploring the most extreme places on Earth. Until next time, remember, our planet is far stranger and more dangerous than it appears on the surface.